Do you feel qualified to comment on any of that?
No, I don't.
Objection is to be on the scope.
Just
Proceed.
finishing up and trying to
Proceed.
get through this. Now, you heard Dr. Lee's testimony with respect to Ron Goldman's shoes. There was a board that contained Ron Goldman's shoes, keys, a pager, buttons missing, a beeper, and disturbance of soil, all that were directed towards his testimony concerning struggle. Do you recall that?
This objection to be on the scope.
Oh. Yes, I do.
Any of that testimony that you feel that you are qualified to comment on?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained. You
Well,
want to narrow it down to footprint.
I'm trying to see what he... Did you examine Ron Goldman's shoes?
Yes, I did.
Did you see a cut on the toe of one of Ron Goldman's shoes?
I examined the shoes for the sole pattern and the foxing strip around the side of it, not anything else. So I didn't see any other features on the shoes.
So in other words, you're telling us you did not see that area that Dr. Lee identified as a fresh cut that would have come from a sharp instrument when the shoe was in the air.
Objection. No mistake.
Sustained.
Did you see Dr. Lee's testimony with regard to the cut which he characterized as fresh from a sharp instrument?
On the shoe?
Yeah.
Yes, that's not what I examined.
And you never saw that on the shoe?
I never examined the shoe, that part of the shoe, for that type of evidence.
To your knowledge, did anyone?
I would have no idea who examined the shoe beside myself and for what reasons.
Now, in this part of Dr. Lee's testimony, there was reference to soil being disturbed in the closed-in area. You recall that?
Again, my interest in his testimony was concentrated on the shoes. I saw a little bit of the others. I don't remember that discussion.
Well, would not impressions made in soil be relevant in terms of your expertise with respect to footwear?
If he stated shoe impressions, that's a lot different than disturbance of soil.
Well, do you know what he said?
To my knowledge, he did not testify to anything about shoe impressions in soil.
Can shoe impressions be taken from soil?
Can they be made in soil?
Yeah.
If the soil conditions are right, yes.
Now, do you recall Dr. Lee's testimony about the envelope in different positions?
I think that's what we discussed the other day, yes.
All right. You saw that.
Part of it, yes.
Did you see his testimony about the, with respect to the envelope again, about the missing lens from the glass and blood material on the eyeglass frame?
Objection. This is beyond the scope of irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did you see Dr. Lee's testimony with respect to bloodstains found in the foyer of the Rockingham home and his examination of the carpet?
Sustained.
Did you see Dr. Lee's testimony with respect to wet transfers on the sock?
Objection. You are beyond
Sustained.
the scope.
Well, is the sock, is socks an area of your expertise?
With regard to what examination?
Blood?
Sustained. This goes way beyond the scope, counsel.
Well, are you confident that you actually saw 95% of Dr. Lee's testimony?
With regard to the
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
with regard to the shoe impression evidence, yes.
Oh, so if I understand your testimony now, what you're saying is that you saw 95% of Dr. Lee's testimony with respect to shoe impressions, but not necessarily with respect to all of what he testified to.
On the East Coast, the coverage of his testimony was limited to part of his testimony. There was time when they cut it off, And all during the testimony, they would go to breaks and commercials about every 10 minutes, which would mean any time there would be a segment of that, I wouldn't see it. I had no way of seeing it. So that's why I've sometimes remember things and sometimes don't, and I have no control over that.
I hate to make this my last question. Do you have Court TV?
No.
Ms. Clark?
Very briefly, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sir, you indicated at one point that when you look at a shoe print, you don't consider anything else. Can you explain that answer? I believe it was an answer you gave to Mr. Scheck on cross-examination when we broke on Friday.
Yeah, I think that was with regard to the envelope in specific, but in general, when we're looking at a shoe impression, very often there is other excess of blood which interferes or obscures that, or there may be other things which interfere with that impression. If it's in soil, it may be leaves that have fallen in, or sticks or rocks that were in the bottom that prevent reproduction of that shoe detail at that point. And of course, no one can examine things that are obscured or interfered with. So the examination would be limited to the part, in the case of the envelope, that was the parallel line pattern, and any other interferences or secondary or primary blood splatter, stain, or absorption on the envelope would be irrelevant. I would only examine what I could, the part of the pattern that I could see.
Right. So you base your opinion on what you can see, not what you can't see.
Of course.
Now, you indicated that you did not look in your database, in your computer database, for the parallel line imprints that were found on the jeans, the envelope, the paper, correct?
That's correct.
And why is that?
The parallel line imprint, in my opinion, is not a shoe impression.
And if it's not a shoe impression, then will it be found in the database?
Well, there are a lot of shoes with parallel line imprints, and I'm sure some of them would become very close to spacing on those jeans, but it's the manner in which the imprint is made on the jean and the absence of characteristics that I, based on my experience, would expect to see in that many impressions. And because I don't believe it's a shoe print, I wouldn't search for something that I didn't believe existed.
And did Mr. Scheck show you imprints made by a shoe that did have parallel lines this morning?
Yes, he did.
And did he ask you for your opinion concerning whether or not those parallel lines bore any resemblance to the ones on the jeans, the paper, and the envelope?
It was limited to the ones on the envelope.
He asked you for your opinion, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
And what opinion did you give him?
I told him they were totally different. Upon looking at that, it's impressive because they're very, very fine parallel lines on the shoe print he showed me. When comparing it side by side, those on the envelope, they're still twice as big, which shows that it would be very, well, in my opinion, impossible to manufacture a mold that would implant that minute a design on a shoe.
So the shoe impression with parallel lines that he showed you, you indicated to him were not at all similar to the parallel lines on the envelope in this case?
Only in the sense that they both ran parallel, but the size of the one that Mr. Scheck showed me was twice as big, twice as wide as the ones on the envelope.
Okay, and you had that conversation with him this morning before you took the witness stand, correct?
Yes, he asked me to look at it, and I obliged him.
Now, the identicator kit uses large-sized pieces of paper, is that right?
Yes, it does.
And the Xerox pieces of paper that you were shown by Mr. Scheck today of the test impressions taken by the jeans were 8.5 by 11?
I saw them on the screen here and briefly when he showed them, and they weren't as large as the identicator pieces, yes.
Now, are you aware, sir, that Agent Diedrich made his own test impressions of the jeans with the identicator?
Yes, because I furnished it to him.
And do you know how he made his test impressions of the jeans?
I wasn't present when he did that.
Do you know whether LAPD took impressions of the jeans in many different ways?
Again, I wasn't involved in that aspect of it. As far, if Agent Diedrich had any information about that, I'm not aware of it.
Question is with that foundation.
No, he said he didn't know about it.
Well, but I object to the question being asked.
Do you have any information about the methods used by Agent Diedrich to make his test impressions of the jeans?
Do I have knowledge of how he did it?
Correct.
No.
Sir, would he be the appropriate person to ask about the way the test impressions of the fabric of these jeans were made?
With regard to
It's his opinion of another person's expertise.
With regard to the fabric impressions, Agent Diedrich would be the one that's qualified to know how impressions, known impressions, should be taken and what is adequate or not adequate within the context of that examination.
So he would be the one to pose the questions to about whether the ribbing would have been spread out by rolling the impression or not, for
Yes, he would.
example. To your knowledge, was he ever asked such questions by Mr. Scheck?
Sustained.
Sir, if the test impressions of the jeans were made by merely pressing the paper on the jeans with your hand, would that make the space between the ribbings seem larger?
Again, I have not made all of these different types of fabric impressions because it's not my area with the identicator, only sock impressions that I use for a footwear-related type exam, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I haven't done a study or had experience in those different ways to know if there's a variation.
Agent Diedrich might know that, though.
Yes, he would.
Based on what experience you do have, sir, do you have any reason to believe that the rolling of impressions of the paper on top of the jeans would cause the ribbing to spread and appear more
Sustained.
widely spaced?
Sustained. Sustained. I sustain his objection to the same question.
If she wants to open it up, I'll go into it.
No, we're not opening that up.
Okay.
We're going to finish.
Sir, do you have experience with cases where bloody shoe prints faded on just the day after they were made?
You know, it's hard to answer that. I would say no because, I mean, I've seen impressions the day after they were made, but I don't go around comparing with a densitometer or something the exact fading of shoe impressions. I know they fade because I see that in my daily work, but I don't try to measure the amount of fade per day, so I wouldn't be able to tell that.
Well, have you seen impressions made in blood with shoes the day after they were made?
Yes,
Have you seen impressions made in blood with shoes a week after they were made?
yes,
2 weeks?
yes,
3 weeks?
yes.
So your experience and your opinion rendered in this case about the fading of bloody shoe prints, is that based on cases in which you've seen impressions the day after as well as years after?
That's correct.
Now, you were asked a series of questions by counsel concerning the conditions under which Dr. Lee did his examination of the Bundy crime scene. Do you recall that, sir?
Yes,
Do you know whether it's true that Dr. Lee had a time limit when he made his investigation at the Bundy crime scene?
Objection. None to knowledge based on.
Do you have any
Dr. Lee's
idea?
testimony.
no, Your Honor.
Do you have any idea whether the defense ever asked to allow him into the Bundy crime scene again to complete his
Sustained.
investigation?
Sustained.
Sir, you indicated, you were asked a question, read a portion of your book about doing careful investigation in order to make sure that all shoe prints are properly detected. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
What is your opinion of the shoe print investigation done by LAPD in this case?
With regard to the photography, they did an excellent job. It's almost hard to recall many other cases over the year where both color and black and white photographs with that type of clarity were taken, with that many exposures taken. The only thing that they might have done in addition would be to have sprayed a chemical enhancement on those impressions. They may have darkened up some of the lighter ones slightly. The surface was very light to begin with. You don't get the amount of contrast change when it's already a light surface because you have dark blood or blood color on a light surface. It might have helped a little. And if, in this case, we had a pair of shoes from the suspect where we were looking for minute detail from cuts or scratches or wear, then it might have been critical to enhance those impressions. But in this case, we didn't. We were only looking for shoe size and manufacture, and the darker impressions were more than adequate, and any lighter impressions would not have made any difference.
As a matter of common sense, sir, if you have a series of shoe prints in blood, will they tend to get lighter as they go on in location, as they get farther and farther?
Yes, one of the things we do for preparation of classes is to, as bad as it sounds, it has to be done, is to step in blood and take steps down a tile flooring, and with each, we number them, and with each step, the track, of course, becomes lighter and lighter. Normally, the imprint starts breaking up around between 6 and 8 steps, and usually after it gets to about 10 to 12, it's all but disappeared, and that would vary with the surface, the weight of the person, and the amount of the blood. But they disappear, become lighter with each step as they go along.
Now, you said it varies with the surface. For example, on concrete, that's a hard surface, obviously, correct?
Yes.
Has it ever happened in your experience, sir, that shoe prints will fade out to the point where they're not detectable on concrete, but then appear on a softer surface that might mold into the shoe itself?
Oh, well,
Could you be more specific?
Yes. In this case, sir, with respect to these fading shoe prints, did you make an observation as to whether these shoe prints faded out at some point along the Bundy Walk?
Yes, they did.
And approximately how far along the Bundy Walk had they gotten by the time they faded out?
Well, when they got up to what I had labeled L, M, and O, they were starting to just become pretty much non-existent. There were a couple thereafter, particularly if they went, and that could vary just with the weight. You could go a step and step lighter and not leave anything, and then the next step, if you really came down heavy, you might have a little evidence of it, and there were a couple beyond that, but pretty much around L, M, and O, they started to lose their appearance.
And was that about halfway down the walk, sir?
Yes, it was.
And then did you see a piece of carpet on the driver's side of the Bronco in which there was...
sustained.
In that situation, sir, where concrete no longer picks up the details of a bloody shoe print, might you still find some transfer of blood from that shoe on a softer surface?
Sustained.
Does the non-enhancement of any of the shoe prints in this case have any effect on the reliability of your opinion that only one pair of shoes, the Bruno Magli size 12, was found on the walkway on June the 13th?
No, it does not.
Why not, sir?
If there were any other shoes that were at the scene, they would have left dark impressions, which became lighter and lighter as they also left the scene.
Now, sir, you were directed to testimony by Dr. Lee concerning the lines, parallel lines that you testified were actually not imprints but trowel marks. Do you recall that, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Putting up people's, I think it's 598.
All right, this is a heavy one.
Yes.
All right, let Mr. Wooden handle that.
I believe the photograph you were directed to by Mr. Scheck is on the Defense Board 1337. Now, Mr. Scheck read you testimony of Dr. Lee from August 23rd, Wednesday. I'm going to read you the testimony from August 22nd. Is that this?
Do you have a page in mind?
My real time says 2:46 on it.
Why don't you just show it to Mr. Scheck?
I'll just use this, Your Honor. I'd like to wrap it up.
Well, Ms. Clark, we're within a couple of minutes, but it ought to be the actual transcript, since we can, so that the reference to the record can be made.
Right, we don't have these, so. Now, you were shown 1337B, correct, by Mr. Scheck? Recall this one?
Yes, I was.
And with respect to this imprint, sir, there was an aspect of the imprints shown, of the lines shown to you here, that you determined was made in concrete.
That's correct.
And could you point that out to the jury, please?
Yes, this is the wavy lines up between the ruler and the obvious heel mark.
And do you recall Dr. Lee's testimony, sir, discussing that particular set of lines as an imprint?
Yes.
In your opinion, sir, is it misleading to discuss something as an imprint that is made in concrete?
Well, if I could explain.
Yes.
The only thing misleading is, as I perceive the discussion, in some context, Dr. Lee, and this is over his testimony, was pointing to things that,
generally and is not responsive, should be directed towards the
Ask a
specific
specific question.
testimony.
Let me ask you this, sir. Do you recall that on one day of his testimony, August 22nd, on Tuesday, Dr. Lee referred to the photograph taken and shown on the far left as you face the photograph entitled Walkway 612, referred to lines in that tile as possible imprint?
yes,
And do you recall that he did not correct or qualify that conclusion until he returned to court the next day, August 23rd?
I believe it was the next day, yes.
And in your opinion, sir, and then at that point he qualified it as being possibly the result of a trowel mark in the tile, correct?
Yes,
But until that next day, he left the jury with the impression that that might be an imprint.
Sustained.
And your opinion is, sir, with respect to the lines on that tile, is it a possible trowel mark or a possible imprint?
no, it's positively a trowel mark.
And you have no doubt about that?
There's no doubt about it. I've felt it with my bare hands and photographed it.
Sir, with respect to the parallel lines on the jeans and on the paper and envelope and on the walkway, are the parallel lines in those three areas, and I grouped the envelope and the paper together, then the jeans, and then the walkway.
Yes.
Are the parallel lines in those three areas similar to each other?
No.
Why not?
in differences of spacing and breadth of the lines and other features. Of course, on the biggest obvious difference is on the walkway, it's probably a shoe print. On the jeans and on the envelope on the paper, in my opinion, it's not even a shoe print, so that's the biggest difference. But if you were just to compare the features of the parallel lines, they are also different.
And is it important, in your opinion, to point that out to the jury, that there's a different mechanism for the imprint that was made on those three areas?
Yes, it is.
And why is that?
So they have a full and clear understanding of what caused those items or what features in those items were significant.
Now, you agreed with Mr. Scheck that you did not say 1337A and B, the lines that are outlined, that are circled by Dr. Lee, were in concrete.
That's correct.
They were not in concrete.
No.
And your testimony with respect to those impressions as to whether or not they were there on June the 13th at all was?
In my opinion, well, with regard to the little parallel lines in the corner of the tile that we have very good photographs of, in my opinion, they absolutely were not there. With regard to the other shoe impression, my opinion is also they were not there, but for several reasons, not for just one, like a photograph.
Now, you indicated in response to Mr. Scheck's question that in a very loose sense you could look at it if you were asked to say that various imperfections in the tile could not be excluded as other footwear impressions. Do you recall that answer, sir,
Well,
in the loose sense?
misstates that was his testimony.
Yes,
Sustained. I'm sorry, overruled. Last question, though.
it is. Do you recall that, your answer?
I'm sorry, I
in that
thought it
regard,
was
sir?
sustained. Could you restate it, please?
You gave an answer that in a very loose sense, you could look at it, and I believe you were referring to the walkway, if you were asked, or anyone, including Dr. Lee, to look at this and say, there are various other imperfections in the tile that could not be excluded as possible footwear impressions. And you indicated, of course, you couldn't. Could you explain to us what you meant by in the very loose sense?
Yes, and looking at the overall photograph,
And referring you back to People's 598.
in looking at the overall photographs of the walkway, as well as the various respective tiles that we have of the close-ups, and looking at all of the evidence with regard to footwear impression evidence, you can see, particularly on the overalls, many discolorations and different shadowing and marks. You can just take every tile and see something that's ununiform about it. But none of them, in my opinion, have any shape or are caused by shoe prints other than the bloody Bruno Magli prints to which I've testified and which are much clearer to see. So the fact that the tile has numerous trowel markings and miscolorations on it, that's basically what I see. I don't see any evidence from these photographs of other shoe impressions.
Thank you,
In-
and I have
in
nothing
blood.
further, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the noon hour. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess until 1 o'clock. And let me see Ms. Clark and Mr. Cochran just for a moment. Are again present. All right, Deputy Trier, let's have the jury. I'm sorry, Mr. Kelberg.
Just very quickly, Your Honor, Mr. Yokelson informed me that shortly before the noon hour he came down, and I'm not sure if it was a direct communication with the court, but the response I got was we had requested to allow Mr. Marks the opportunity to review the transcript of the interview with Dr. Whitehurst in order that we may ascertain his views of the allegations that are made. The allegations, just for the most part, do not directly pertain to anything Mr. Marks did in the Simpson case. They deal with other allegations, and that not to allow Mr. Marks the opportunity to review what these allegations are and to give us his perspective on these allegations obviously is, in our judgment, quite unfair, for we have no idea of how much of a mini-trial there would have to be regarding the allegations. Separate and apart from that, as the court is probably...
So the bottom line is you're asking for
A-
the opportunity to make an additional copy of the transcript.
And submit it directly to Mr. Martz for him to be able to comment upon it to me.
Well, we object. We intend to use that for impeachment, and there are specific things about this case that's just not accurate. There was a lot of discussion about this case, and there are memos about this case, so we will be cross-examining or asking further questions of Agent Martz about his truthfulness in this case.
Your Honor, I don't think that's an accurate characterization, but whether or not I'm correct on the percentage or Mr. Blasier is, this is the equivalent, in essence, of an expert's report, Dr. Whitehurst's report, and I
All right, is
I
the
don't
matter
know what...
submitted?
Yes,
Granted.
thank you, Your Honor.
Restricted to one copy.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Deputy Trial, let's have the jurors, please.
Filing a motion for request for judicial notice that we're going to ask the court to give before we conclude today. And so at the conclusion of Mr. Bodziak's testimony, other than that...
I hadn't given waxing or waning yet either.
No, I know.
I know, okay.
So we have some more to add to that. We're filing it with the court now, and defense will get a copy. Before we conclude today, we need to be heard on that so that we can wrap it up.
All right, what's the nature of the request for judicial notice?
There will be a request to have the court take judicial notice. This is pursuant to Henry Lee's testimony, Your Honor, that the defense never sought a court order for inspection of the socks between November 22nd, on the date they were returned from DOJ, and February 16th, the date that they actually did inspect it. They never sought a court order for inspection of the Bronco or complained to this court about the sufficiency of their access to the Bronco. They never sought a court order for inspection of the Bundy crime scene
All
or
right,
complained...
I got the
Get it.
flavor. And Mr. Bodziak, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, good afternoon again, Mr. Bodziak.
Good afternoon.
All right, Ms. Clark, have you concluded your redirect examination? Ms. Clark?
I'm sorry, yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Completed redirect.
Mr. Scheck?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Just a few questions, Agent Bodziak. Ms. Clark asked you on redirect examination about, she asked you, can anyone examine what's obscured? Do you recall that?
Yes,
And she asked you if you based your opinion about the parallel line imprints on what you could see and not on what you couldn't see.
that's correct.
And you said yes.
Yes,
Now, was not part of your opinion concerning the parallel line imprint evidence on the envelope and the piece of paper based on the fact that you did not see a border?
that's one part of it, yes.
Well, that's something that you did not see, correct?
The fact that I did not see it is the whole point, sir.
Well, you said just a second ago you based your opinion based on what you could see, not on what you can't see. Didn't you?
Absence of characteristics is the significance here.
Now, would you not agree that there are blood stain impressions over the parallel line imprint on the piece of paper?
Yes, there are.
And Mr. Scheck, you're making reference to a particular exhibit that's before the jury.
1338.
Right, making reference to the upper left-hand photograph.
And there are also blood stain impressions over the area of the parallel line imprint on the envelope.
Yes, I'm well aware of that.
And with respect now to, you gave a testimony on redirect examination that you based your conclusion that the imprints on the jean did not come from shoes based on the manner in which the imprints appeared on the shoes.
I'm not
On the
sure.
jeans, I'm sorry.
No, it's based on several things.
You don't recall that question on redirect?
I don't recall the exact quote. My answer is based on many things. If you asked me, was it in part based on that, I would have said yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated on redirect examination that the use of the identicator kit to make test impressions and to draw conclusions about imprints on the jeans from fabric was Agent Diedrich's area.
With regard to the fabric impressions, yes.
And you would rely on his expertise in conducting that examination.
He would do it independently. I wouldn't rely on it. He doesn't come back to me and report to me, and then that is a basis for my opinion. He does that independently and reports that independently.
But I think that Ms. Clark's question to you on redirect examination, that's not your area, that's his area.
That's correct.
And are you aware that Agent Diedrich testified that as far as he could remember, he had never done such an analysis before of bloody imprints on fabrics?
Objection, that misstates the testimony.
Sustain. Phrase the question.
Are you aware of what Agent Diedrich said about the amount of experience he had in terms of doing analysis of bloody instruments, imprints, fabric on fabric?
That's irrelevant.
Oral.
I did hear that part of his testimony, yes.
Okay. Now, on redirect examination, you complimented the Los Angeles Police Department, saying that they had done an excellent job photographing imprints at the crime scene
That's correct.
because they made both color and black and white.
And the manner in which they took them and the quality of the subsequent photographs that they developed.
But, Agent Bodziak, in your book, you emphasize, before beginning the crime scene search, careful thought should be given to what occurred at the crime scene, how footwear impression evidence could contribute to the proof of fact, and what areas of the crime scene might contain impression evidence. Then footwear impressions should be looked for aggressively and carefully. What is not looked for will not be found. You agree with that?
Asked and answered.
Oral.
You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Now, based on, have you reviewed the testimony of Dennis Fung, Andrea Mazzola, Detective Lang, as to how the Bundy crime scene was processed?
Objection beyond the scope.
Oral.
I have some knowledge of that, yes.
Do you feel that you're in a position to say that they did an excellent job in giving thought, before they began the crime scene search, to what could have occurred and how footprint impression evidence could contribute to the proof of fact, and aggressively searching out footwear impressions?
Yeah, they knew what the crime was. It was quite obvious. They could see bloody shoe prints leading from an area which was almost totally covered in blood. They, as far as I remember from their testimonies, looked for other evidence of shoe marks, and they did their best to preserve it. And they ordered that it be photographed and recorded, which it was. As to anything else that went through their minds that they didn't state, I wouldn't be able to testify to that. But from what I heard, that's exactly what they did. They made a point of looking for footwear impressions. There were those that were obvious, and they also looked all the way down the walkway, documented them all the way to the end in the back of the residence, and photographed everything that they could see.
Agent Bodziak, in terms of, you didn't read their transcripts, right?
I haven't read anybody's transcripts.
And what percentage of the testimony of Fung or Mazzola or Detective Lang with respect to how they sought out and examined footwear impressions do you think you heard?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustain.
How much, what percentage of their testimony do you think you heard?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustain.
How much of their testimony did you hear?
Objection, argumentative.
Let's not get into this.
You feel comfortable, based on your knowledge of what occurred at this crime scene, that you can tell this jury that they did an excellent job in aggressively seeking out latent and or nearly invisible footwear impressions at the Bundy crime scene. You feel comfortable with that?
Objection, Your Honor. Really invisible?
Of course, Mr. Scheck, if there were any invisible footprints at the scene, certainly they could have missed them. The point is, they would not be invisible if they were in blood. You wouldn't have a footwear impression, for instance, the one in parallel lines on tile 10 that was in blood 10 tiles down with no other parallel line footwear impressions before it. It's impossible unless the person that committed the crime can fly. And there's no way for them to have walked through that blood and not leave other impressions. And with the tiles that they photographed, with the general scene photographs, there's no evidence of any other footwear impressions.
Agent Bodziak, you say walk through the blood, right?
That's correct.
You are referring to the pool of blood that was on the walkway that appeared to have come from Nicole Brown Simpson.
Yes.
In fact, when you were asked questions on redirect examination about whether or not there could be other imprints from shoes, you said no because they would have left dark impressions. You recall that on redirect?
Would have left darker blood impressions, yes.
Darker blood impressions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that, again, is based on the assumption that somebody would have to have walked through the crime scene, stepping through the pool of blood on the walkway that was left by Nicole Brown Simpson.
That's correct.
And that is based further on the assumption, sir, that somebody who was involved, or person or persons involved in this crime, would necessarily have had to walk through that pool of blood.
If they were at the scene of the murder, since I have been to the scene and I believe everyone else has, it's so small, so confined, combined with the fact that people do not consciously think of what they're walking in on an everyday basis, much less under that kind of a stressful situation, they would not have been able to be at that scene involved in the murder without walking through that blood and leaving evidence of it.
Agent Bodziak, ask you to assume that a struggle occurred with more than one perpetrator, with Ronald Goldman, and that one or more of those perpetrators left the scene before Nicole Brown Simpson's throat was cut, causing that pool of blood on the walkway. Do you have that in mind?
Objection, Your Honor, it's improper hypothetical since facts not in evidence.
Do you have that in mind?
Are you asking me to isolate that thought for a moment?
I'm asking you to keep that thought in mind.
I'll keep it in mind.
Now, if that occurred, one or more perpetrators could have left the crime scene without walking through that pool of blood.
Are you suggesting there were two independent murders at the same place, 10 minutes apart?
Oh, is that necessary for this hypothetical?
It seems to me that's what you're suggesting, that there was one person that might have murdered Ron Goldman and then left the scene, and then along comes somebody else and murders Nicole Brown 2 feet away.
Agent
That's the way I
Bodziak.
understand it.
I'm only asking you to make this assumption, that the murder of Ron Goldman occurs, and then, as among the last things done at the crime scene, the throat of Nicole Brown Simpson is cut, causing the pool of blood on the walkway. Can you keep that in mind?
I can keep it in mind, yes.
Did you hear 8 days of testimony from Dr. Lakshmanan, which included that hypothetical?
No objection, that was stated.
Sustained.
Now, if that were to occur, could a perpetrator or perpetrators have left the crime scene without walking through that pool of blood?
In this case, I don't believe that's what happened, but if you're to suggest it, I consider it under your hypothetical where there was one murder and later another one, I suppose that it could, but I don't believe that's what happened.
You don't believe that's what happened?
No, sir.
You weren't there, were you?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
The imprint evidence, the bloodstain imprint evidence that Dr. Lee discussed, that whole board, you don't recall that testimony.
Objection vague.
Sustained.
Do you remember an analysis of the order of deposits on the envelope that Dr. Lee made in his testimony?
I previously testified that I did not see that part.
All right.
Well, would it not be consistent with the hypothetical I posed to you that there were a set of imprints made at the crime scene that were partial, based on less blood flow, somewhat less blood flow than the pool of blood?
No, I don't think that the sequence, the fact that there may be an imprint and then later blood would flow on the envelope or may get moved and acquire other blood in one manner or another would have anything to do with my exam of the imprint.
But wouldn't it be a fair statement that your answers to my questions here and your statement on redirect examination, that if there were other imprints from shoes, bloody imprints from shoes, that the impressions would have to be dark, is based on your assumption that the perpetrator or perpetrators of this crime would of necessity have to have walked through the pool of blood on the walkway?
It's based on my visit twice to the crime scene, my view of volumes of notebooks of photographs of the crime scene, my examination of the quantity of blood on the walkway, the distance that a person would have to jump if they, for some reason, were conscious of footwear impressions, which they're not, and all of the other factors. In looking at crime scenes over the years, with that kind of scenario and that kind of confined area, a person that was in that area would leave bloody shoe impressions. They would be first dark and then get lighter as they walked away.
Well, all of what you've just said is based on the assumption that somebody would have to walk through the pool of blood caused by the severing of the neck of Nicole Brown Simpson, right?
Of course it would, yes.
All right. Now, you were asked on redirect examination about the parallel line shoe print impression that Dr. Lee identified as a shoe print, which he found on June 25th.
Is that the one on the 10th tile?
Yes.
I believe? Yes.
All right. Now, could we play 10, 11? You,
Can I see what council's proposing?
this is the, do you recall, I'll preface it this way. As part of the examination of Dr. Lee that you saw, do you recall a time when Mr. Goldberg played a tape of two police officers breaking down the Bundy crime scene?
Yes, I recall seeing that.
All right, can I play that?
Yes. Which exhibit is this, Mr. Harris? Overruled.
There's more? Okay. Agent Bodziak, you collected the shoes of officers that were present at the crime scene.
There were photographs of some of the officers sent to me to view with regard to what design shoes they had on.
And this thing also included the photographer, Mr. Rokar?
I believe so. It's been a while. I'd have to go back and look at the officers' names.
And would it be your testimony that none of the shoes that you were given of people that were involved in the crime scene would match the parallel line imprint impressions of the shoe print Dr. Lee identified on June 25th?
No, that's correct.
Have you been shown by the prosecutors a videotape of the inside of the Bundy residence where candles are lit?
Not by the prosecutors. I think I saw something like that on the news one time.
Have you been provided any other shoe prints from other people that might have been at the crime scene on June 13th for comparison to the imprint that Dr. Lee identified as a shoe print on June 25th?
None other than those of the officers that were submitted to me.
And it's your testimony that they could not have accounted for that imprint?
That's correct.
I have nothing further.
Clark?
Yes, briefly. Mr. Bodziak, do you know whether or not the shoes of the officers depicted in that clip that you were shown, Defense 1011, were ever photographed and shown to you?
I don't know the identity of the officer in that clip, so I don't know if they were one of the officers whose shoes were submitted to me or not.
And you don't know whether all of the officers who ever walked through the crime scene between June 13th and June 25th shoes were shown to you in photograph form either?
No, I do not.
Were you aware that the film clip you spoke of showing the candles burning through the window was taken by a cameraman from a TV station?
I believe when I saw the news clip that the reference was made to that. Yeah.
And so you would have to go and locate who that videographer was and see if he could remember what shoes he wore in order to determine whether his shoes made that imprint. Would you not?
That's correct.
And do you know whether the family of Nicole Brown was present at that Bundy walk and walked on that Bundy walk between June 13th and June 25th?
I don't know that.
Did you ever see any film clips that showed a number of people crowded around the 875 Bundy location on June 17th?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
So if there were a number of people that were walking up and down the walkway in Bundy between June 13th and June 25th, you would have no way of knowing whether it was one of their shoes that made that wavy line imprint that was on the 10th tile.
No, I would not.
And the wavy line imprint made on the 10th tile was photographed on
Strike. This has nothing to do with the wavy line imprint.
the parallel line imprint.
All right, so we're clear.
And the parallel line imprint, that was the one photographed on June 25th by Dr. Lee, correct?
Yes.
And that was that a fairly faint imprint, sir?
Yes, it was.
Did you see any darker imprints of that type preceding it on the Bundy walkway?
No, none on any of the other tiles or in any of the other close-up photographs or any photographs that were taken at that scene.
And what does that lead you to conclude about the appearance of that, about the materialization of that imprint on the 10th tile on June the 25th?
I would not be able to determine a scenario where a person after the fact or during the crime stepped in blood and left only a footprint proposing it's in blood. I'm just hypothetically saying in blood on the 10th tile and nowhere else. It's impossible.
Then in your opinion, sir, was that parallel line imprint on the 10th tile that was photographed by Henry Lee on June 25th, was it even present on June the 13th?
In my opinion, it was not present.
Does it have any significance to the solution of this murder?
I don't believe so.
Thank you, sir.
With respect to those officers you saw in the videotape, in the ordinary course of your work, wouldn't it be the responsibility of the prosecutors to provide you with the footwear impressions of all police officers that were involved in the crime scene?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Were you were sent a whole series of footwear impressions from the Los Angeles Police Department?
No. Pictures of shoes.
Pictures of shoes?
Yes.
All right. And the purpose of showing you the pictures of those shoes was to provide you with essentially a set of eliminations so that one could distinguish impressions made from people that were processing the crime scene versus other people that might have been there previously.
In this particular case, because of the large quantity of blood, they were sent for elimination to make sure that no one else had that Bruno Magli design.
Right. And you don't know whether those two officers were ever sent to you?
The ones in the videotape?
Yeah.
No, I don't know the names of the individuals in the videotape.
And the prosecutors never sent you any other footwear impressions of people that were at that crime scene between June 12th and June 25th?
No, they did not.
Thank you.
Ms. Clark?
Sir, if police officers walked on the walkway after the photographs of the shoe prints were taken, then by definition, their shoes could not have made the Bruno Magli shoe prints that you identified, correct?
No, their footwear impressions would be irrelevant to the crime.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Bodziak, again, thank you very much, sir. You were excused. All right, anything else from the people?
Only the very brief matter that I mentioned to the court.
All right, you did ask the court to take judicial notice of one other matter regarding the phase of the moon.
Yes, I did, Your Honor.
All right, do you want me to do that at this time?
Certainly, Your Honor. Thank
Any
you.
comment, Mr. Cochran?
With regard to the phase of the moon?
Phase of the moon?
No, I don't think so. I think,
Right. We discussed this
okay,
earlier.
well, we covered.
Right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution has asked the court to take judicial notice of a certain fact, and what that means is that if I determine that it's appropriate, this is a fact that is not subject to dispute. And I have agreed to take judicial notice of the following fact, that on June the 12th, 1994, the moon was a waxing crescent with 12% of the moon's surface illuminated. All right, I'll read that one more time. On June the 12th, 1994, the moon was a waxing crescent with 12% of the moon's surface illuminated. All right, Ms. Clark, anything else from the people?
We have the one further request of the court that I think can be resolved quickly, and then the people would like to conditionally arrest the rebuttal case.
All right. Let me ask the jury then to step back into the jury room. I'll just have a legal discussion with the lawyers for a few moments, and then hopefully we'll be able to conclude with the prosecution's rebuttal case. All right, I have a request for, a permissive request for judicial notice. Ms. Clark.
As we've indicated,
If I may, just to maybe short-circuit this, we just received this. It contains transcript sites. We have to search the record to check the dates. We're not prepared to respond to this at this time.
When you say you just received this,
I mean, I just received this.
Exactly. We just got this show.
Got this.
5 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago?
I don't know when you first got it. It was today. He just got it.
Yeah. I mean, this is,
5 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago?
well, I saw this 2 minutes ago,
All right.
and it's my job to respond to it. I'm not prepared to do it, and because it has citations that I have to check, and there's a long record here. There's numerous applications going back and forth. I have to check the date of who had access to the socks when and what the orders were. I think Dr. Lee's testimony speaks for itself as to what he knew and what he did. If they want to call other witnesses about something else, they can. But the point is that I'm not prepared to argue this at this time and accurately
cite to the record, and it would be
When
unfair to ask you
when
to
will
do
you
so.
be prepared to do so?
Tomorrow.
9 o'clock. Does contain citations to the record.
It does, it's true. We have a lot else we can do anyway, so.
Indeed, we do. All right, Mr. Cochran, assuming that the prosecution rests their case at this point, and I've indicated to them that I'm going to allow them to conditionally rest because you have not concluded your defense case. You know how that goes. All right. Do you have any other witnesses you're prepared to present this afternoon?
Yes, I'd like to proceed right away, and I would like the court's indulgence because some of the witnesses who might technically be in our case in chief, we can't get to until tomorrow probably, so we'd like at this point to call Dr. Herbert MacDonell, who might be more nearly characterized as a cerebellum witness, but we'd like to call him now. We're ready to proceed.
All right, this is as to what issue?
Primarily as to the glove drawing, glove shrinkage, in light of the testimony of Mr. Rubin when he came back here in the rebuttal case.
What are we going to get into? We're going to get into our glove experiments?
Yeah, the glove experiment, which you've already passed on and authorized.
Obviously, this has got to be part of the defense rebuttal, correct? I don't know what it relates to in terms of Mr. Rubin's testimony. How's it relevant?
Well, Mr. Rubin testified that when he looked at the gloves that Mr. Simpson was wearing initially in 1990 and wearing up until December of 1993, I believe, he testified that, in fact, I think he testified that the gloves appeared in the pictures to be somewhat bigger even in 1993 than they were in 1990. That, in conjunction with his earlier testimony back in June of this year, leads to the clear inference that the substantial shrinkage that occurred, which he said was about 15%, was due from the blood being soaked and smeared on the gloves during the night that these two people were killed. It would have been somewhat suggested before that that could have been the result of weather. But since we saw Mr. Simpson wearing these gloves in a number of pictures where it's raining on them, where it's snowing on them, where it's sleeting on them.
I don't think we ever saw snow or sleet, but we did see a lot of rain.
Okay, a lot of rain, and it was very cold rain. And discussion of hand warmers and the like, but nonetheless, the gloves were at least as large at the end of '93 as they were in December of 1990. Then the inference, unmistakably, that the prosecution will be arguing is that this 15% shrinkage occurred as a result of the events of June 12, 1994. And so he will be testifying to his glove drying experiment, which deals with substantial quantities of blood being smeared on the gloves to show that that's just not right.
All right, my recollection is, did we have a videotape of this, or was it still photos?
No, it was still photos, and which were given to the people and given to the court. We had a hearing on the admissibility of this evidence, and you ruled that it was admissible.
All right, Ms. Clark, who was it Mr. Goldberg who was handling this? Ms. Clark.
I thought, okay, it was my recollection of Mr. Rubin's testimony, Your Honor, that he testified it was a combination of the weather conditions to which gloves would be subjected, as well as perhaps the introduction of the blood with the freezing and the drying and the unfreezing, et cetera. But the issue is really not shrinkage as much as it is stretchability. And I don't think that anything Mr. Rubin testified to in the People's Rebuttal case opens up that issue for Mr. MacDonell.
We did discuss, however, the issue of shrinkage during the course of Mr. Rubin's third appearance as a witness. And we discussed it in terms of the weather conditions, in terms of rain, and in terms of the heat generated by hand warmers, if such were the case. So we did discuss it during shrinkage during the course of, and if you recollect, the argument was that the defense also withheld, for tactical reasons, presenting Dr. MacDonell on this shrinkage experiment, so as to hope to preclude Mr. Rubin from coming back and testifying again, but
Well, that was their reason. I don't
no,
think
I
that has...
understand. I
yeah.
understand, but I'm just putting
But-
our discussions back into context.
And I understand that, but the court's characterization is, of course, correct with respect to Mr. Rubin's testimony and the being subject to weather conditions, but it had nothing to do with shrinkage caused by the introduction of blood on the gloves, and that's the subject matter of the glove drying experiment that Mr. MacDonell performed. So it's not relevant to rebuttal, because we are talking apples and oranges. Mr. Rubin talked about the weather conditions to which the glove was subjected. Mr. MacDonell proposes to talk about what will happen to the glove as a result of blood, and it's two different things.
But I think the point, though, that Mr. Neufeld is trying to make is that soaking in blood can't account for the amount of shrinkage that we see here. And that if it fits Mr. Simpson, apparently as it does in the videotapes, as well as it does then, it may not be the same pair of gloves now, since this one that we have in evidence appears to be shrunken by 50%. I think that's the inference that they're trying to draw here.
It is, but is it a fair inference, and is it fair, is it on point in terms of Sir rebuttal in view of what we introduced in our rebuttal case? It's not the same thing. If you talk about subjecting to weather conditions, fine. Let Mr. MacDonell testify that he's a glove expert and he knows what the fat liquor and all the other aspects of leather are going to do when they're subjected to weather conditions, but it certainly has nothing to do with the introduction of blood. I mean, we are talking apples and oranges here, so I don't see the relevance.
All right.
In addition to what kind of gloves did he test?
My recollection, though, is that he did the glove experiment on one of the gloves that were from...
He did the experiment on the gloves that Mr. Rubin provided, which are the Aris Isotona lights, the same exact pair of gloves that Mr. Darden used for his second glove demonstration with new gloves.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. Ms. Clark, do you have your materials?
No, I don't.
All right. Why don't we take a recess then until 2 o'clock, get your materials, and then we'll reconvene. I'll allow you to rest conditionally in front of rest the people's rebuttal case, subject to application should it become necessary to reopen, and then we'll proceed. Then we'll proceed.
I just wanted you to also know that in light of, I've also had Professor MacDonell listening to Mr. Bodziak's testimony, and he may also be rebutting certain things he just heard Mr. Bodziak say this morning. I'm talking to him at this moment about those things.
Well, before we launch into that, we'll have a hearing outside of the jury, outside the presence of the jury, just to see where we're going on that.
Fine.
All right? Okay, 2 o'clock. All right, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, I need a slight break between cross and thank you, Anna.
All right. All right, Deputy Carr, let's have the jurors, please.
It was difficult to locate all these materials because we...
I understand. Not to worry today.
On the discovery I have pertains to an experiment. I wanted to propose a brief 402 with Mr. MacDonell concerning the experiment he conducted here, and that would be with respect to the gloves that he performed the experiment on. The discovery I have pertains to an experiment done on thin-slate gloves. None of my discovery shows the performance of the experiment on the Aris light gloves. All I have is a letter.
Deputy Carr, hold yours. I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about Aris leather lights. Hold them for just a second. That's my recollection.
The recollection is 100% correct, number one. Number two, they received complete discovery, including photographs of the actual experiment conducted by Professor MacDonell. They received the notes of the experiment conducted by Professor MacDonell and the report of the experiment conducted by Professor MacDonell. And it was absolutely unambiguous that it was the Aris Isotona light gloves that had been furnished by Mr. Rubin.
Leather light.
Leather light.
I think as soon as you throw an isotoner, you get in synthetic materials here. The Aris leather lights were all natural materials with the exception of the thread.
Lights, I would put them that way.
Yep. Thinsulate is a synthetic insulation material.
And additionally, Your Honor, I wanted to do a brief 402, question Mr. MacDonell outside the presence of the jury to determine what other gloves, for the preparation of his testimony, in this case, he examined or tested, and whether or not he tested the gloves depicted in the photographs that we've shown to Mr. Rubin during our rebuttal case, or
You
our
know,
reopened people's case, however you would say.
Mr. Neufeld, anything else about any other gloves that he's tested?
The only gloves that the experiments were conducted on are the gloves that were provided by Mr. Rubin, period. That's it.
And does Mr. MacDonell intend to testify in any manner to the gloves that are depicted in the photographs shown to Mr. Rubin?
He hasn't done any experiments on that.
I mean, in the evidence gloves.
Correct.
Right. I don't think he's done any, those have not been taken out of evidence for that purpose, I don't believe.
Oh, no, and I meant in the photographs shown to Mr. Rubin as well, the ones that we've presented most recently at the football games.
I think I made it very, very clear the extent of his testimony, Your Honor.
Yes, I think so. I've already ruled on this
Okay.
previously.
Is Mr. MacDonell going to testify in any manner to the location of the gloves shown in the football game photographs, or their condition, or their fit, or anything like that?
No, I think the offer was the experiment.
If that's the indication, then may I ask that the court order Mr. MacDonell to offer no explanation or no testimony pertaining to the whereabouts of the gloves in the photographs?
Well, I don't
As it
think we're
would be
getting into
hearsay.
that. We're talking about an experiment with regards to the Aris leather lights, correct?
He's providing expert testimony. He's not providing lay testimony about other matters.
All right, thank you. Deputy Trower? After Mr. MacDonald, Mr. Cochran?
Police officer, I'm sure you're ready to expert to
All right, no, I just asked a question. Let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. And Ms. Clark, with regards to the people's rebuttal case, what is your position at this point?
At this point, Your Honor, the people will conditionally rest rebuttal subject to the matters the court is aware of.
All right, people having rested their rebuttal case. Mr. Cochran?
Yes, we're ready to proceed, Your Honor, with the balance of our case and some small bits. So,
All right, Mr. Neufeld?
Thank you. This time, Your Honor, the defense calls Professor Herbert MacDonell.
All right, Mr. MacDonald? Recall.
Recall?
Recall.
Okay.
All right, Professor?
Raise your right hand, please. You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in response to anything before this court should be the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please have a seat and state this for your first and last names for the record.
Herbert, Leon, Leon, MacDonell, capital M-A-C, capital D-O-N-E-L-L.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hi. Hi. Professor MacDonell, did you have an opportunity to watch on television portions of the testimony of Mr. Rubin, who testified about Aris leather-light gloves?
Yes, I did.
And did you have an opportunity to watch his testimony back in June of this year, as well as more recently, perhaps a week ago?
More recently, I don't recall it in June. I wasn't here in June. I
But
was
did
in
you
Alaska.
I'm sorry, but did you review some of his testimony, though?
I'm
from back in
familiar
June?
with it. I did not review it in detail.
Okay.
Excuse me, gentlemen. Professor, would you allow Mr. Neufeld to finish asking you the question before you start your answer, as the court reporter is going to have a difficult time?
I'll try.
Thank you, Professor.
And as you sit here today, sir, are you aware that Mr. Rubin testified that both the Rockingham and Bundy gloves are approximately 15% smaller than our new standard extra-large Aris leather-light gloves?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
You remember that 15% figure?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And, sir, did you also watch on television last week when Mr. Rubin was shown photographs of Mr. Simpson wearing brown gloves at NFL football games?
Yes.
And were you aware, sir, as you sit here today, that Mr. Rubin testified that, if anything, the brown gloves that Mr. Simpson is wearing in December of 1993 appear to be somewhat bigger in the photographs than the brown gloves in 1991? No?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Well, sir, did you have a chance to actually look at those photos yourself?
Yes, I have.
And would it be fair to say from the photographs there is no evidence of any visual shrinking of those gloves?
Sustained. Foundation.
Now, did you conduct an experiment to determine whether or not smearing Aris leather-light extra-large gloves with a considerable amount of blood would cause 15% shrinkage?
Yes, I did.
And did you also conduct an experiment to determine the approximate drying times of gloves that had been heavily smeared with blood?
Yes.
And,
Sustained. Sustained. Drying times. Proceed.
Your Honor, may I have a s-
Shrinkage. No. Shrinkage.
May I please have a sidebar? I think there's a distinction. I just want to make it to the sidebar, if I may.
I thought we already made the distinction very clear the last time we talked about this.
I think there's a slight difference, if I may.
What the corporation?
Actually, 1 minute to.
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, counsel.
Professor MacDonell, to conduct this experiment, did you receive from the defense a pair of extra-large Aris-like gloves that had been provided to us by Mr. Rubin from the Isotona Company?
Yes, I did.
And were you aware of the fact that Mr. Rubin had stated that the gloves that you received for the experiment were identical in terms of make and model and size to the gloves from Bundy and from Rockingham?
Oh, that is my understanding.
Okay. In other words, sir, did you receive extra-large gloves?
Yes, I did.
And were they Aris leather lights?
Yes.
And in fact, were you aware of the fact that the gloves that you received were identical to the gloves that Mr. Darden used in his second demonstration with new gloves involving Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Objection, no foundation,
I will.
Now, would you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did as an experiment to determine the extent of shrinkage, if any, when gloves are heavily smeared with blood?
Yes, I took the gloves one at a time and put, for example, the right glove on my right hand and a rubber latex glove on my left hand. I had a laboratory technician draw a vacutainer of blood, and comparing that to a calibrated vacutainer, I knew how much blood was in that tube. I then poured the blood over the leather glove, cupping the palm upward, as I'm indicating, so it would hold the blood as much as possible. This was done very quickly, so there would be no clotting involved. There was no anticoagulant in the tube. This was a tube that just drew blood. You must work rather quickly or it will clot. I then put the tube down and began smearing the blood with the rubber tips of my fingers. The reason for the rubber tips and the gloves in total, the rubber ones, was because I was going to alternate and put that hand in the left glove next, so I didn't want it wet with blood or anything else. I just kept smearing it around until it was running through my fingers of the glove and around the back, and I just kept doing that for approximately half a minute or more or less until I felt I was no longer working with wet fluid blood. This was over a very large funnel. The funnel emptied into a graduated cylinder, so I could determine the amount of blood that was recovered. Through an independent experiment, I found the amount of blood on the funnel was approximately 2 drops. So I knew the volume that I started with, the volume I ended with, the volume that was on the funnel, and therefore the approximate volume of what was on the glove, which was approximately 2 milliliters. And that was a very wet, surfaced, glistening glove. I immediately took it off and put one in a bag, which I sealed up, a plastic Ziploc bag. This was then repeated with the same arm giving blood again, and this time we had again approximately 9 milliliters of blood or thereabouts in the vacutainer, poured it over the other hand, repeated the process, caught the blood that did not adhere to the glove, and subtracting the amount of the blood on the fingertips and in the funnel, I concluded again it was about 1.9 to 2 milliliters of blood in each case. The amount that was adhering made the gloves very glistening and bloody, for want of a more descriptive term. And then this glove was also allowed to dry without being placed in a bag. These were both done very quickly, so there was no clotting of the blood on the surface of the glove.
Now, Professor MacDonell, while you were conducting this experiment, was someone taking photographs of the procedure?
Yes, they were. And prior to actually doing the experiment, rather than measure the gloves, linear measurements with a ruler, I simply put the gloves onto a copy machine and do all these things at once and also keep a timing record.
Now, the gloves that are shown in the photograph, or the gloves shown in this photograph, is that the actual Aris Light glove that you received?
Yes, that's the right one in the current Elmo picture.
And, sir, you said that the right glove was put into a plastic bag,
Yes,
and then did you repeat the same experiment with the left glove?
yes, the same experiment with the left glove, and again, I used the fingertips of a rubber latex glove to keep trying to get the blood to impregnate into the leather as much as I could. It wasn't just a light motion laterally, it was more or less pushing down in to try to saturate the external surface. Although it did not wet that well, it was certainly covered with blood and wet when I finished.
And you said you used approximately 9 milliliters of blood?
That's what I poured over it, but that's not how much remained on the glove. There was only approximately 2 milliliters.
And that would be the approximate amount for the second glove as well?
Yes, I think one was 1.9 and one was 2. I have those figures, but it's really not, it's an estimate because I did measure the blood on the funnel and estimated the thin film of blood on the gloves and added that to the amount of blood, or subtracted it from that which was used by adding it to what was recovered.
And by the way, sir, in your opinion, would the results have been any different had you poured twice as much blood on these gloves as you did?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Do you have any basis for giving an opinion as to whether it would make a difference if you poured twice as much blood on the glove as you poured?
Yes.
And what is the basis for that, sir?
Well, the volume of blood I don't think is as crucial as the length of time. In other words, if I recycled it, if I just kept recycling it, I don't know how long it would be that I could do that before the blood had clotted into a gelatinous mass, and then that would dry on the glove as well. So if it's wet, and it won't hold any more.
Wrong objection, that was all speculation, no foundation shown.
Now, with the second glove, after you conducted the experiment on the second glove, where did you place it for drying?
I placed the second glove on filter paper in a humidity chamber.
I'll show you photograph E. Ask if you can identify that. Could you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what is in photograph E?
It's a very large glass desiccator, and in the top part you can see the glove. That is the center, actually. You can see the glove. You can actually see the red blood on the glove. That's resting on filter paper. The filter paper is on a wire mesh that supports it above the slurry of potassium chloride, which is a wet slurry, a slushy mixture is the best way to describe it.
Did you make any effort, sir, to replicate the temperature and humidity conditions as they existed on the night of June 12, 1994, and the early morning hours of June 13, 1994?
Objection calls for speculation, that's foundation.
Foundation.
Did you, by the way, when you, in this special chamber, are you able to control the temperature and humidity?
Yes.
Okay. And to determine what temperature and what humidity to set for that drying chamber, did you review the official United States Department of Commerce Weather Service reports for Los Angeles Airport for the night of June 12, 1994, and the morning hours of June 13, 1994?
Objection, no foundation, no expertise, call for speculation.
Yes, I did.
I show you, sir, what is already in evidence as Defendant's Exhibit Number 1280.
It requires extrapolation.
Or will, it's in evidence. I've received this already.
That's not what it's beyond the scope of his expertise.
Or will.
Okay, what are you going to do?
not true.
Proceed.
Thank you. We ask you to take a look at defendant's 1280, sir. Do the U.S. Weather Service reports for Los Angeles Airport for the night of June 12, 1994, and the morning hours of June 13, 1994, from approximately 10:30 or 10, I think, I'm sorry. Are estimates for time and temperature given at a certain portion of each hour, at a certain point in each hour?
Yes, they are.
Is it, and what time is it given, is the measurement given?
It is usually given approximately 10 minutes to the hour, 9 or 10 minutes to the hour, being like 10:50, 11:50, and so on.
And sir, what do those official Weather Service records indicate was the range in temperature between approximately 10:50 p.m. on the evening of June 12th and 9:50 a.m. on the morning of June 13th, 1994?
The temperature range is 64 degrees Fahrenheit to 69 degrees Fahrenheit.
And sir, what was the temperature for your drying experiment that's depicted in this picture?
Sustain. Shrinkage experiment.
No, but...
What was the temperature inside the chamber?
Okay. What was the temperature inside of the chamber, Professor?
69 degrees Fahrenheit.
And sir, do the records indicate what the humidity range was from 10:50 p.m. on the evening of June 12th till 9:50 a.m. on the morning of June 13th?
Yes, they do.
And what was the humidity range?
Objection, Your Honor, has to do with this statement contained on Bodziak with respect to the interpretation of those records.
Mr. Counsel, sidebar with the record, please.
Professor MacDonell, does the official U.S. Weather Service report that you have in front of you state what the relative humidity was at each of those different hourly readings?
Yes, it does.
And what was the relative humidity range from 10:50 in the evening of June 12th till approximately 9:50 in the morning on June 13th?
The total range was 72.7 to 81%, but I should point out this doesn't mean it starts at the low value and goes to the high value any more than the temperature. That was the maximum range. It doesn't mean the lowest temperature was the first reading. So it ranged in those, between those figures I've given.
And sir, what was the humidity that you set in your drying chamber?
I set the humidity, you don't set it. You use a system of chemicals to establish a constant humidity by which hygrometers are calibrated. And the nearest mixture that I could produce was 85%, which was slightly higher than the percent listed, but not from what I was first informed, which was in error. It was 85%.
And sir, on the official U.S. Weather Service report, is there a column which indicates whether or not there was any precipitation during each of those hours?
Yes.
And sir, at any time from 10:50 in the evening on June 12th through 9:50 in the morning on June 13th, was there any recorded precipitation?
There's so many columns here, I've got to find the right one. Pardon me. There was none. 0.
And sir, during that same period of 10:50 p.m. to 9:50 a.m., was there any dew on the ground?
No, the dew point never got within 6 degrees of the temperature never got within 6 degrees of the dew point, which is the point at which you would see condensation or dew moisture.
And sir, is there a column in the official Weather Service reports to indicate the presence of any obstruction, any visual obstruction, such as fog or haze?
Yes.
And do the reports indicate whether there was any ground fog at all that would obstruct one's view from 10:50 in the evening on June 12th to 9:50 in the morning on June 13th?
Sustained.
Do the reports indicate, sir, what the visibility level was for
Yes.
each hour from 10:50 in the evening till 9:50 the following morning?
Sustained. It's not relevant to LAX.
Professor MacDonell, are you aware of the fact that the only official Weather Service readings throughout the entire night for the Los Angeles vicinity are those at LAX?
No, I wasn't aware of that. I wouldn't be aware of it in New York.
Is there any indication at all in those official Weather Service reports that there was any fog that could create any moisture on the ground on the night of June 12th and the morning hours of June 13th?
Sustained. I think we have the basics, so we have temperature and humidity, so let's move on.
Okay. Now, did you visually examine the glove that was collected at Rockingham?
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to see the places where there is dried blood on the palm side of the glove and the back side of the glove?
Well, there's stains which has been testified to as being blood. I did not test them, but there's certainly staining consistent with what blood stains look like.
And sir, I now show you what is People's Exhibit 68D.
Oh, well.
Professor MacDonell, this is a picture that was taken by the police of the glove at Rockingham, a close-up, in the area where it was collected. Do you see that picture?
Xerox copy on it, just so the record's clear.
Fine. Xerox copy.
No, it's not. Is this a
It's a,
Xerox
it's a
copy?
photo Xerox because the original photograph
All right.
is mounted on a board that's in the basement, Your Honor.
Thank you. Proceed.
And sir, based on your expertise in the area of blood stains and blood stain analysis, if this glove had been dropped at that location within 10 or 15 minutes after the wet blood was smeared on it, would you expect to see blood on the leaves or on the pavement that the glove is resting on?
Objection, speculation, no
Sustained. Sustained.
Sir, did you actually see the location of the blood stains on the glove that was found at Rockingham?
Yes, I did.
And from looking at this photograph, would those areas that had blood stains be in contact with the pavement and leaves directly beneath it?
Objection, no personal knowledge, no foundation.
Sustained. We're here talking about shrinkage, counsel. That's a scope issue.
Sir, are you aware of the fact that the criminalist in this case did not offer any testimony of seeing blood stains either on pavement?
Sustained, counsel. The scope is shrinkage. Move on.
Now, you said that there came a time when the gloves were dry that you did this experiment on. Is that right?
That's correct.
And after they were dry, what did you then do with the two gloves?
I copied them on the copy machine that I'd used before when I copied them prior to the experiment. Same copy machine.
And did you then compare the Xerox copy of the gloves taken before you did the experiment with the transparency Xerox of the gloves after they had dried, having had all this blood smeared on them?
Yes, I did.
And what, if any, shrinkage did you observe as a result of your experiment on both the left glove and the right glove?
I would have to say it's negligible. They're certainly not congruent because they were done at different times, but I put them down as fairly as possible. That is to say, without any lateral teasing around to stretch them one way or another. Just laid them flat, did the experiment. When they're dry, laid them flat again. And they are not congruent. That is, they're not the same copy. But when you place one over the other and move it around slightly, I can detect no shrinkage or no linear or vertical or horizontal shrinkage at all, or change and shift.
And sir, do you have the Xeroxes and the transparencies that you made when you conducted this experiment with you today?
Yes, I do.
Could you take them out, sir? Let's start with the left glove first, if you have that handy, or the right glove, whichever is easiest for you.
All right, you've given a copy of these to counsel.
Yes. Which glove do you have out?
I don't have either glove, but I've got a copy of one, of the left glove.
Okay, let's start with the left glove. Now, I have to mark these for identification.
Your Honor, we've never seen these, ma'am.
Your Honor, that's not true. They were given to people in discovery.
No, we got Xeroxes.
All right, let her see the originals.
These are Xeroxes.
That's a Xerox.
No, the transparency is held by Mr. MacDonell. We've
All
never
right,
seen
let
them.
counsel see the
You did
transcripts.
receive that as a Xerox as well, Your Honor.
Let her see the original, please.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Can we use the other hand as well? Sure. But let's give you those back first, because I want to mix up the left and the right.
can we approach?
Without the court report.
Yeah, bring the...
All right, thank you, counsel. Don't mix those up, Mr. Neufeld. I know, I noticed. Mr. Neufeld.
Let's begin with the left hand. You have in front of you three different items, and I guess next in order is,
This would be 1379, and there'll be...
let's make this 1379 A, B, and C, and then we'll make the other hand 1380, if that's all right. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Professor MacDonell, could you please explain to the jury what 1379 A, B, and C are?
Do you want to mark them A, B, and C? Make the red... Which one do you want as the...
A will be the before shot, the pre-drying, the pre-shrinkage experiment, Xerox of the glove. The brown transparency can be, after the gloves are dried, will be B.
No, that's not after, that's before. There are two before and one after, for clarification.
All right, well, okay. You mean there's one transparency and one on white that's before?
Shall I explain this?
Please do.
The one on paper is before. LB stands for left glove before experiment. I then made a left glove before transparency because I felt by having left after in red was perhaps not easy to hold up to a light, so I thought I'd make it what I call jury friendly and have them both transparencies, that's all. So my label 1 is before the experiment, my label upper left 2 is the same thing, it's the same identical picture. And then 3 is after in red. And you can compare 3 to 1 or 2, whichever seems to be the easiest for your eyesight.
Then with the court's permission, perhaps what would be easiest is not to introduce at all the one on white paper and simply introduce the two transparencies. The brown one will be a transparency of the condition of the glove prior to the shrinkage experiment, and the red transparency will reflect the condition of the glove after the shrinkage experiment.
Not wanting to tell you how to try your case, though, but my personal...
I'm willing to defer. Go
My
ahead.
personal examination of the one on the paper with the red is that it's easier to make the overlay comparison, but you're the lawyer.
All right. At this point, I really, move this along, we'll do it that way then. And we'll simply introduce the one on the paper then will be A, and the red overlay will be B, and we will not introduce the other transparency.
Fine.
Okay? And So, Professor MacDonell, did you do the same thing for the right glove?
Yes, I did.
And could you please show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what it appears to be? Both the before photocopy and the post-shrinkage experiment transparency.
Yes, in this instance, my number 7 is the right glove before, which is on paper. It's not a transparency. The red transparency is the right glove after. And again, they're not congruent because they're not exactly the same. They were done hours and hours apart.
But was the one in red done only after the gloves were dry?
Yes, and it says RA, that's right after, and the other one says RB, that's right before.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to, and by the way, I think the second set should be marked Defendants 1380, A and B, with A being, unfortunately, A is going to be before and B is after. And at this time, with the court's permission, I would like to be able to pass them around to the jury.
Yes, would you hand the left glove to juror number 1 and the right glove to juror number 7?